What happens when one of America's most beloved singers sits down for what should be a light-hearted morning show interview, only to have the conversation take a sharp turn into deeply personal territory? What happens when the cameras keep rolling as tensions rise, voices get louder, and a guest who came to promote her latest project finds herself defending her entire career? Well, that's exactly what unfolded when Kelly Clarkson appeared on Today with Jenna and Friends. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of this. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on after you hear this whole story, because this one is going to have people divided. So Kelly walks onto the set looking absolutely radiant. She's wearing this gorgeous emerald green dress, her hair is perfectly styled, and she's got that signature Kelly Clarkson smile that could light up any room. The audience is cheering. Jenna Bush Hager is standing there ready to greet her with open arms, and everything seems perfect. They hug, Kelly waves to the audience, and she settles into the couch next to Jenna and the other co-hosts. The energy is warm, the small talk is flowing, and Kelly is laughing about how she almost tripped on her way to the studio that morning. Classic Kelly, right? Self-deprecating, funny, relatable. This is what everyone loves about her. Jenna starts off with the usual questions. How's the talk show going? How are the kids? What's new with the music? Kelly is answering everything with her typical charm and enthusiasm. She talks about how crazy her schedule has been, juggling her own show, working on new music, being a mom, and somehow still finding time to sleep. The audience is eating it up, laughing at all the right moments, and Jenna seems genuinely engaged. Then Kelly mentions that she's been working on some new songs that are really personal to her, songs that reflect where she is in her life right now, and that's when things start to shift. One of the other co-hosts, let's call her Sarah, jumps in with what seems like an innocent question at first. She says, "So Kelly, you've been through so much in the past few years, with your divorce and everything. Do these new songs reflect that journey?" Now, Kelly's smile doesn't fade, but if you were watching closely, you could see something change in her eyes, a little guardedness creeping in. She takes a breath and says, I think all artists pull from their real-life experiences. That's what makes music authentic. But I'm in such a good place now, and I'm really excited about this new chapter." Sarah nods, but then she keeps going. She says, "Right, but I think what people really want to know is, how did you get through it? I mean, divorce is hard for anyone, but doing it in the public eye, with so much speculation and media attention, that must have been incredibly difficult." And Kelly, to her credit, handles it gracefully at first. She says, "It was definitely challenging, but I had amazing support from my friends and family. My kids are my priority, and I just focused on making sure they felt loved and secure through everything. I think when you go through something hard, you come out stronger. And that's where I am now." But then Jenna chimes in, and this is where you can feel the temperature in the room start to rise. Jenna says, "Kelly, I have to ask, because I think so many women out there can relate to this. When you're going through a divorce, especially one that's so public, do you ever feel like you failed? Like you couldn't make it work?" And the studio goes quiet for a second. Kelly's smile is still there, but it's tighter now. She shifts in her seat and says, "I don't think divorce is a failure, Jenna. I think staying in a situation that isn't healthy or happy, that's the real failure. I think choosing yourself and your well-being, that takes courage." The audience claps at that, and you can tell Kelly is hoping that's the end of it. But Jenna isn't letting it go. She says, "No, I totally hear you, and I respect that. But I'm sure there were moments where you questioned yourself, where you wondered if you could have done something differently. I mean, you took vows, you built a family, and then it ended. That has to come with some regret, right?" And now Kelly's expression is changing. The warmth is fading, and you can see her trying to maintain her composure. She says, "I don't live in regret, Jenna. I made the best decisions I could with the information I had at the time. And yes, it's sad when something ends, but I'm not going to sit here and pick apart every choice I made. I did what was right for me and my children." Sarah jumps back in and she says, "But Kelly, don't you think your fans deserve to know the real story? I mean, there was so much speculation, so many rumors, and you've been pretty quiet about the details. Don't you think people want to understand what really happened?" And this is the moment where you can see Kelly's patience starting to wear thin. She leans forward a little, and her voice is still controlled, but there's an edge to it now. She says, "My fans have been nothing but supportive and respectful of my privacy. And I think there's a difference between sharing your journey and exploiting your pain for entertainment. I've shared what I'm comfortable sharing, and that should be enough. Jenna laughs, but it's one of those uncomfortable laughs, and she says, "Okay, but you're a public figure. Kelly, you put yourself out there. You talk about your life on your show. You sing about your experiences. You can't really blame people for being curious." And Kelly's jaw tightens. She says there's a difference between being curious and being invasive. "Jenna, I talk about what I choose to talk about on my terms. I don't owe anyone a play-by-play of the worst moments of my life." The other co-hosts are exchanging glances now, and you can tell they're sensing the tension. But Sarah, either not reading the room or deliberately pushing, says, "I just think it's interesting that you're so defensive about this. We're just having a conversation. This is what we do on morning shows. We talk about real life, real issues. If you didn't want to talk about it, why even mention the personal songs?" And that's when Kelly sits back, crosses her arms, and says, "I mentioned that I've been writing personal music, because that's what artists do. I didn't come here to be interrogated about my divorce. I came here to talk about my work, my show, and the positive things happening in my life." Jenna tries to smooth things over. She says, "Kelly, no one's interrogating you. We're just trying to have an honest conversation. Our viewers appreciate authenticity. They want to see the real you." And Kelly, God bless her, is still trying to keep it together. She says, "The real me is someone who sets boundaries. The real me is someone who doesn't think every painful moment needs to be dissected on national television. I've been open about my struggles, but there's a line, and I think we've crossed it." But Sarah isn't backing down. She says, "So you're saying we've crossed a line by asking you about things you've already talked about publicly? That doesn't really make sense, Kelly. If you've talked about it before, why is it suddenly off limits now?" And Kelly's voice gets a little louder. She says, "Because there's a difference between me sharing my story in my own words, in my own space, and you guys pushing me to relive trauma for the sake of content. I've been gracious, I've been patient, but I'm not going to sit here and let you turn my pain into a spectacle." The studio audience is dead silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Jenna tries one more time to redirect. She says, "Kelly, I think maybe we're all just a little too passionate about this topic. Let's take a breath and talk about something else. Tell us about your upcoming tours. What can fans expect?" But Kelly shakes her head. She says, "You know what, Jenna? I don't think I can just pivot to tour dates after that. I feel like I was brought here under false pretenses. I was told this would be a fun, upbeat segment, and instead, I feel ambushed." And that word, ambushed, hangs in the air like a bomb. Jenna's face goes pale, and she says, "Ambushed? Kelly, that's a strong word. We're just doing our jobs. We ask questions. That's what interviewers do." And Kelly stands up. Not dramatically, not storming off yet, but she stands up and she says, "Asking questions is one thing. Badgering someone after they've clearly set a boundary is another. I've been in this industry for over 20 years. I know the difference between a tough interview and someone trying to exploit me for ratings." Sarah scoffs, actually scoffs, and says, "Exploit you? Kelly, you're being ridiculous. This is a morning show, not an attack. Maybe you're just not used to people challenging you anymore. Maybe everyone around you just tells you what you want to hear. And that's it. That's the moment everything explodes." Kelly's face goes from annoyed to absolutely furious in about 2 seconds. She points at Sarah and says, "Excuse me? Not used to being challenged. I have been challenged my entire career. I was challenged when I won American Idol, and people said I'd be a one-hit wonder. I was challenged when I gained weight, and the entire internet had an opinion about my body. I was challenged when I went through a divorce and had to protect my children from a media circus. So don't you dare sit there and tell me I'm not used to being challenged. What I'm not used to is being disrespected in the name of entertainment." Sarah throws her hands up and says, "Oh, so now asking you questions is disrespectful. Kelly, you're a celebrity. This comes with the territory. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." And the audience gasps, like audibly gasps, because that's a wild thing to say to someone like Kelly Clarkson, who has been nothing but professional and kind throughout her entire career. Jenna immediately tries to step in. She says, "Okay, Sarah, I think that's a bit much. Kelly, please sit down. Let's just take a moment and reset here." But Kelly is shaking her head. She says, "No, Jenna, I don't think we can reset from that. Sarah just told me that if I can't handle being disrespected, I shouldn't do interviews. That's not okay. I came here as a guest, as a colleague in this industry, and I'm being treated like I'm some kind of puppet who's supposed to perform emotional labor for your ratings. And Jenna's face is flushed now. She says, Kelly, that's not fair. We respect you. We've always respected you. This is just a misunderstanding. Kelly laughs, but it's not a happy laugh. It's bitter. She says, a misunderstanding. Jenna, you asked me if I felt like a failure for getting divorced. You pushed me after I clearly stated my boundaries. And then Sarah here basically told me to toughen up or get out. How is that respect? Explain that to me. And Jenna is stumbling over her words. She says, I was just trying to ask real questions. Questions that I think a lot of women would want to ask. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad, Kelly. I was trying to connect with you on a human level. But Kelly's not buying it. She says, connecting on a human level means listening when someone tells you they're uncomfortable. It means respecting boundaries. You didn't do that. You kept pushing because you thought it would make good television. And maybe it will. Maybe this whole thing will go viral and you'll get millions of views. But at what cost? At the cost of my dignity. At the cost of making me relive one of the hardest periods of my life for your audience's entertainment. One of the other co-hosts, who has been quiet this whole time, finally speaks up. Let's call him Mike. Mike says, Kelly, I think everyone here just wants to understand where you're coming from. We're not trying to hurt you. But you have to admit, you've talked about your divorce before. You've mentioned it on your show. So it's not completely out of bounds for us to ask about it. And Kelly whips around to face him. She says, Mike, when I talk about it on my show, it's on my terms. I control the narrative. I decide how much I share and when I share it. That's completely different from being put on the spot and pressured to go deeper than I'm comfortable with. Do you not see the difference? Mike shrugs and says, I guess I see your point, but I also think you're being a little oversensitive. This is a conversation, not an interrogation. And Kelly's mouth drops open. She says, oversensitive. Did you really just call me oversensitive for having boundaries? This is exactly the kind of dismissive attitude that makes people, especially women, feel like they can't speak up for themselves. You're invalidating my feelings because they're inconvenient for you. Sarah jumps back in, and she's clearly fired up now. She says, you know what, Kelly? I'm tired of walking on eggshells around celebrities who want all the perks of fame, but none of the scrutiny. You want the magazine covers, the talk show, the record deals, the money, but the second someone asks you a tough question, you fall apart. That's not how this works. And Kelly's voice goes quiet, which is somehow more intimidating than when she was loud. She says, I'm not falling apart, Sarah. I'm standing up for myself. And if you think that asking invasive questions about someone's personal trauma is just part of the job, then maybe you need to rethink your approach to journalism. Jenna is frantically trying to salvage this. She says, okay, everyone needs to take a breath. Kelly, please, let's just move on. We can talk about literally anything else. Your music, your show, your favorite recipes, whatever you want. Just please don't leave like this. And Kelly looks at her, really looks at her, and says, Jenna, why would I stay? So you can pretend like the last 10 minutes didn't happen. So we can all fake smile our way through the rest of this segment. I'm not going to do that. I have too much self. Sarah mutters something under her breath, and Kelly catches it. She says, what was that, Sarah? You want to say something? Say it to my face. And Sarah, emboldened now, says, I said that maybe your self-respect is actually just ego. Maybe you can't handle not being in control of every situation. Maybe that's the real issue here. And the other co-hosts look horrified. Mike is covering his face with his hand. Jenna looks like she might cry, but Kelly just nods slowly. She says, my ego, right? Because setting boundaries is ego. Standing up for myself is ego. Not allowing myself to be bulldozed is ego. Got it. She starts to unhook her microphone, and Jenna reaches out to stop her. Jenna says, Kelly, please. We can fix this. We can cut this part out. No one has to see this. Just sit back down, and we'll start over. And Kelly pauses. She looks at Jenna and says, you want to cut this out? So your audience doesn't see how you treat your guests when they don't play along. So they don't see the real dynamics of this show. No, Jenna, I think people should see this. I think people should see what happens when someone says no and you keep pushing anyway. Sarah stands up to now. She says, fine, Kelly, Leave. Walk out. That's real professional. That's really going to make you look good. And Kelly turns to her and says, "You know what, Sarah? I don't care how it makes me look. I care about how I feel, and I feel disrespected. I feel like I was set up, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable. So yes, I'm leaving, and if that makes me look unprofessional in your eyes, I can live with that." Jenna is pleading now. She says, "Kelly, we've known each other for years. You've been on this show before. We've always had great conversations. Please don't let this one bad moment ruin everything." And Kelly softens just a little. She says, "Jenna, I don't have anything against you personally. But this wasn't just one bad moment. This was a pattern of behavior that started the second I mentioned my personal life. You all sensed blood in the water and went for it. And I'm not going to be the shark bait." Mike tries a different approach. He says, "Kelly, think about your fans. They tuned in to see you. They're excited you're here. Don't you owe it to them to finish the interview?" And Kelly shakes her head. She says, "My fans love me because I'm authentic, because I don't fake it. And staying here pretending everything is fine when it's not, that would be fake. My fans would rather see me stand up for myself than watch me suffer through another 20 minutes of this." Sarah rolls her eyes and says, "Suffer? You're so dramatic. We asked you some questions about your divorce. We didn't waterboard you." And Kelly's voice gets loud again. She says, "You know what, Sarah? Just because something isn't physical torture doesn't mean it's not harmful. Emotional boundaries matter. Psychological well-being matters. And the fact that you're minimizing my discomfort says everything I need to know about how you view people." Jenna puts her head in her hands. She says, "This is a disaster. This is an absolute disaster. Kelly, please. I'm begging you. Let's just take a 5-minute break. We can all cool down and come back." And Kelly looks around the studio, at the cameras that are still rolling, at the audience members who are watching this unfold with shocked expressions, at the producers who are probably having a meltdown in the control room. She takes a deep breath and says, "A 5-minute break isn't going to fix this, Jenna. The damage is done." Sarah crosses her arms and says, "What damage, Kelly? You're making a mountain out of a molehill." So we asked some personal questions. Big deal. That's what talk shows do. If you wanted a puff piece, you should have gone on a podcast where they just kiss your feet for an hour. And Kelly's eyes narrow. She says, "There's a middle ground between a puff piece and an ambush, Sarah. It's called a respectful conversation. Maybe you should try it sometime." Mike stands up and positions himself between them. He says, "Okay, this is getting out of hand. Everyone just needs to calm down. Kelly, I'm sorry if we made you uncomfortable. That wasn't our intention. Can we please just move forward?" And Kelly looks at him and says, "Mike, your apology means nothing if the behavior doesn't change. And I don't see any acknowledgement from Sarah or Jenna that what happened here was wrong. I see defensiveness. I see justification. I don't see accountability." Jenna finally shows some emotion. Her voice cracks a little as she says, "I'm sorry, Kelly. I'm sorry if I pushed too hard. I was just trying to do my job, but clearly I crossed a line. I didn't mean to hurt you." And Kelly's expression softens slightly. She says, "I appreciate that, Jenna. I do. But an apology after the fact doesn't erase what happened." And that's the final straw. Kelly turns to Sarah with a look that could cut glass and says, "You know what? Yes, I'm still leaving because Jenna's apology, while I appreciate it, doesn't undo the fact that you've been antagonizing me this entire time. You've dismissed my feelings, you've belittled my concerns, and you've made it clear that you don't respect me or my boundaries. So why on earth would I stay here and subject myself to more of that?" Sarah laughs, actually laughs, and says, "Because that's what professionals do, Kelly. They finish what they start. They don't run away. The second things get uncomfortable. But I guess when you're Kelly Clarkson, you can just do whatever you want, and everyone has to deal with it." And Kelly takes a step toward her. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that makes it clear she's not backing down. She says, "Running away and protecting yourself are two different things. I'm not running from discomfort. I'm removing myself from a toxic situation. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see that is concerning." Mike tries to interject again. He says, "Ladies, please. Can we all just take a step back? This is getting way too heated. Kelly, Sarah, you're both passionate people. Maybe that's where this clash is coming from. Maybe you're more alike than you think. and both Kelly and Sarah turn to him and simultaneously say, "We are nothing alike." The unity of that moment would be funny if the situation weren't so tense. Mike holds up his hands in surrender and says, "Okay, bad read on my part. Sorry." Jenna is wiping at her eyes now, and she says, "I just don't understand how we got here. Kelly, you've always been so gracious, so kind. I've never seen you like this." And Kelly's face softens when she looks at Jenna. She says, "Jenna, I'm not a different person. I'm the same Kelly I've always been. The difference is that today, I reached my limit. Everyone has a breaking point, and you all found mine. I've been kind and gracious in countless interviews, even when questions were tough, because there was respect. That's what's missing here today." Sarah shakes her head and says, "Respect is a two-way street, Kelly. You come on our show, you act like you're above answering our questions, and then you lecture us about respect. How is that respectful to us? We're just trying to do our jobs." And Kelly's voice rises again. She says, "I never said I was above answering questions. I answered your questions, Sarah. I engaged with you. But when I communicated that a line had been crossed, instead of acknowledging that, you doubled down, you pushed harder. That's not doing your job. That's being cruel." The word cruel hangs in the air, and you can see it hits Sarah differently than the other criticisms. Her face changes, and for a second she looks almost vulnerable, but then she hardens again and says, "Cruel. That's what you think of me, that I'm cruel. I'm a journalist, Kelly. I ask hard questions. If that makes me cruel in your eyes, then fine. I'll be cruel, but at least I'm honest. At least I'm not putting on some fake persona for the cameras." Kelly stares at her for a long moment and then says quietly, "I don't think you're inherently cruel, Sarah, but your behavior today has been cruel, and I don't think being a journalist gives you a free pass to disregard people's boundaries. Good journalists know how to ask tough questions while still maintaining humanity. You've forgotten the humanity part. And that's sad because I'm sure you didn't start out this way. I'm sure you got into this industry because you cared about stories and people, but somewhere along the way, you lost that. Or maybe you just buried it under the need to get a viral moment." Sarah's jaw clenches, and she says, "You don't know anything about me or why I do this job. You don't get to psychoanalyze me just because I asked you some questions you didn't like." And Kelly nods and says, "You're right. I don't know you, but I know what I experienced here today. And what I experienced was someone more interested in creating conflict than having a genuine conversation. Maybe that's not who you are all the time. Maybe today was an off day for you too, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm not staying." Jenna stands up and walks over to Kelly. She puts a hand on her arm and says, "Kelly, I know we messed up. I know I messed up, but please, can we just finish this, even if it's just 5 more minutes? We can talk about your music, your upcoming projects, anything positive. Just don't leave it like this. Don't let this be how people remember your time on our show." And Kelly looks down at Jenna's hand on her arm and then back up at her face. She says, "Jenna, I understand that you're worried about optics. I understand that this looks bad for the show, but I have to prioritize my own well-being over your show's reputation. I hope you can understand that." Jenna's eyes fill with tears and she says, "I do understand. I wish it didn't have to be this way." And Kelly's voice is gentle when she responds. She says, "I wish it didn't either. But this is the consequence of what happened here. Actions have consequences, even on live television. Especially on live television." Mike speaks up again and says, "Kelly, for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with a lot of grace. More grace than I would have in your position. I'm sorry we put you in this situation." Kelly gives him a small smile and says, "Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And I want to be clear, I don't think you're all bad people. I think this was a bad situation that spiraled out of control. But that doesn't mean I have to stay and endure it." Sarah, who has been quiet for a minute, suddenly says, "So that's it? You're just going to walk out and leave us here to deal with the fallout? That's really classy, Kelly." And Kelly turns to her one last time and says, "Sarah, the fallout is not my responsibility. The fallout is the result of choices that were made by you and your team. I didn't create this situation. I'm just refusing to participate in it any longer." She finishes unhooking her microphone and hands it to a nearby producer who looks absolutely terrified. Kelly says to the producer, "I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of this. I know this isn't your fault." The producer just nods, speechless. Kelly then looks at the audience, who have been watching this entire exchange in stunned silence. She says, "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. I know you came here for something fun and entertaining, and instead you got a front row seat to a conflict that wasn't fair to you. But I hope you understand why I have to leave." A few audience members start clapping, then a few more, and within seconds, a good portion of the audience is applauding Kelly. Not everyone, but enough that it's noticeable. Sarah's face goes red, and she says, "Oh, great. Now you're turning the audience against us. That's real mature, Kelly." And Kelly shakes her head and says, "I didn't turn anyone against anyone. They're reacting to what they saw. Maybe instead of being angry at me, you should reflect on why they're reacting this way." Jenna is crying openly now, and she says, "This is the worst day of my career. Kelly, please, I'm begging you one more time, don't do this." And Kelly walks over and gives her a hug. She whispers something in Jenna's ear that the microphones don't pick up, and Jenna nods through her tears. When Kelly pulls back, she says, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Jenna, I hope you learn from this. I hope you all do, because the next guest you bring on might not speak up like I did. They might just suffer in silence and never come back, and that's not good for anyone." Mike says, "We will learn from this, Kelly, I promise." And Kelly nods at him. Then she looks at Sarah one more time. Sarah is staring at the floor now, arms still crossed, jaw still tight. Kelly says, "Sarah, I hope someday you understand why this mattered so much to me. I hope someday you realize that people's boundaries are more important than content. But whether you do or not, I'm at peace with my decision to leave." And with that, Kelly turns and walks toward the exit. As she's walking away, Sarah calls out, "You're making a huge mistake, Kelly. This is going to blow up in your face." And Kelly stops, doesn't turn around, and says over her shoulder, "Maybe it will, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you say the same?" Then she continues walking. The camera follows her as she leaves the studio floor, and you can see her shoulders straighten, her head held high. She doesn't look back. The studio is in chaos now. Producers are running around, the other co-hosts are arguing amongst themselves, and Jenna is being comforted by staff members. Sarah is standing alone, looking like she's trying to decide whether to be angry or defensive or something else entirely. Mike is talking to someone off camera, probably trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. The audience is buzzing with conversation, everyone talking about what they just witnessed. And somewhere beyond those studio doors, Clarkson is probably taking the deepest breath of relief, knowing she stood up for herself even when it was hard, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant walking away from something she'd committed to. Because at the end of the day, your peace of mind and your self-respect are worth more than any television appearance, any publicity, any attempt to just keep the peace and go along with something that doesn't feel right. So there you have it. The complete story of what happened when Kelly Clarkson walked off the Today with Jenna and Friends show. A morning interview that was supposed to be light and fun turned into a masterclass in setting boundaries and refusing to be pushed past your limits. Now, I want to hear from you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already,